Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Leadership Void Podcast. I'm Enrique with my co host Vince to bring you the best in our veteran, military spouse, and first responder community. And Vince will introduce today's guest.
Thanks, Enrique. We're kicking off July strong. Christmas in July here, right? With Kyle Crooks. He's the CEO of AVT Simulation from right here down the street in Orlando, Florida. Kyle, let's start off. Welcome to the show. Tell us a little bit about you.
Well, thanks for having me on here, Enrique and Vince. I appreciate that. I'm a retired Air Force communications officer. Did stints at NORAD, NSA. It's over here at Cape Canaveral, right down the street there, and a few other places. I ended up being a commandant for an ROTC unit at University of Florida. I don't say go Gators because I'm a Florida State grad. So I'd actually have my Seminole helmet sitting on top of my desk. If the cadets got in trouble, they had to salute the Seminole helmet. So that's how I kept them in line when I did that. So I did 10 years active duty, and then I did 10 reserve duty. So I'm one of those mixed guys. And then while I was doing reserve duty, I was working for a large defense contractor there by the Cape, and I finished out my 20 years through the reserve. So. Got a master's degree in computer science from Florida State, like I was talking about, and a computer engineering certificate from the Air Force Institute of Technology. And so I started off as a officer in the Air Force, but I was a programmer doing technical stuff, and then got more and more into management. Then got out of active duty, still doing the management stuff for the reserves, but got back into the technical stuff for the defense contractor, and then kind of worked my way up the chain there until getting a job here at AVT.
What a wonderful trajectory for you, and thank you for your service. I know Vince is plumb happy that Air Force is being represented, but I'm a Knowles fan, so I love the way you handle those cadets.
There
That's a
you
great
go.
idea to make sure that they did keep in line. We're both familiar with AVT, but tell us, for the audience sake, what AVT is all about.
Sure. So we're a small disadvantaged minority owned business. So I don't own the business, I run it. Robert Abascal is the owner of AVT Simulation. He's of Cuban descent. So that's where the minority owned portion comes into play. So we're about between 100 and 200 people strong. We're about a $40-50 million business. And we're in the modeling and simulation and training business, which means we build simulators like an aircraft simulator or a tank simulator. And then we might train the warfighter on that simulation. And then we might build courseware, do stand-up instruction, those kinds of things. So really, what we strive to be is the best small business system integrator in the modeling and simulation space, which we're pretty good, and we stand a good chance of getting there. So what system integration means is just we're able to put the whole thing together. So we may not build every little piece of the simulator, but we manage those who do. And then it all comes into our manufacturing facility, and we screw it all together and then test it all out and add our own pieces to it, and then deliver it to the customer, and then maybe train the warfighter on it. So we're mainly Army, aviation, and then some Air Force mixed in. We got a Marine contract as well. That's kind of where our sweet spots are. We got some international partners that we're building things to. So the U.S. Army sells an Apache helicopter to a foreign country. We might provide some simulators to that country for the Apache. And then we got a series of courses as well that we teach others how to build simulators, which is kind of unusual. That I think we're the only ones doing that. So yeah, we might be, emboldening our competitors by telling them, the secret sauce of how to build simulators, but we think it's good for our reputation and good for the industry.
No, absolutely. And it keeps you sharp, right, on edge because you
Yeah.
have to be ahead of technology. So I love everything you all are doing for the branches you mentioned and also internationally. Now, speaking to our audience about entrepreneurship challenges or lessons learned, anything you would like to offer them?
Sure. Yeah. Well, of course, a big thing here over the last 4 or 5 years has been COVID. COVID was very challenging to those in leadership positions, especially in small businesses, because in the small businesses we don't have a lot of wiggle room, right? We need that cash flow coming in. We need that contract completed. And the government really didn't come back and say, they said treat contractors nicely, but they didn't come back and say, and here's how to treat them nicely. So for a while there, we're thinking, okay, I remember standing there looking out my windows thinking I had the choice. I could either force people to continue to work on the simulators and deliver per the contract, or kill somebody, or make somebody really, really sick. And that was very stressful in that time. And so I had to make those decisions. So my key thing was to make sure that I brought the employees in on the decision making, right? And have open communication with them, talk to them about, hey, what's going on? What are our choices? What are the possible outcomes? What are your ideas about how to handle this? That kind of thing. Get their inputs in, and then just try to make the best, decision that we could. So we follow a framework. It's called Good to Great by Jim Collins. I don't know if you've heard it. It's kind of an old book that's out there, but the reason I like Good to Great is it's statistics based. It's actual data that was collected on a bunch of paired companies, and figure out what were the companies that were paired at one point in time, and one succeeded and one didn't. What did the ones that succeed have in common? And so Jim Collins created a framework for that. And one of the key elements of that framework is brutal facts and level 5 leadership. So level 5 leadership has a big portion of it is communication to the employees. Brutal facts is tell the truth, be brutal about what challenges you got in front of you, and then level 5 leadership says be confident that you're going to overcome it. So we employed those to our employees, and said, okay, here's the brutal facts. If we don't deliver on these contracts, we're not going to get paid. If we're not going to get paid, we could go into default, that kind of thing. But on the other hand, if everybody comes in here and puts their hands on the simulators, we might be spreading this COVID thing that at that time we thought was going to kill, one out of X number of people. And so we had that conversation. And so we worked things out with shifts and patterns and masking and all sorts of stuff that basically the employees came up with. So we came out of COVID, we kept our head above water through that whole time. But at the same time, our employee surveys, which we do every quarter, actually went up as a result of how we handled it. That was one area that I think we did pretty well with.
And it's always a great idea to allow those that have their hand on the plow to give you some feedback as to how that impacts not only them, but the outcome of the product they're producing. So great job there to be at least forthright with the hard truths, and also leading them through that process in order for them and the company to overcome. Now, you spoke about the company, but what's in the future for AVT?
Well, we just won our largest program in AVT's history a little bit over a year ago, and it's a 12-year contract. We're building what's called collective reconfigurable trainers. And collective basically means it's a mission trainer. It's not about learning how to fly these Army helicopters. It's learning how do the Army helicopters work together with the ground, with the air, with UAVs to complete a mission. So that's what a collective trainer is. And they're reconfigurable, which means they can be different aircraft with some change out of some hardware. So it can be a Black Hawk, a Chinook, it can be an Apache helicopter. And so we're building those devices right now. It's going to go into the flight training center at what used to be called Fort Rucker, now called Fort Novosel, where the Army helicopter pilots go to be trained. And so it's going to take us a couple of years to build them, and then we're going to be supporting them for a long period of time. Biggest contract we've had, like I said. And so that we're heads down trying to make that happen. But then right after that, we got a contract for the Netherlands to build some devices for them in a training center that they have. And then we're doing this avionics maintenance trainer for the Air Force. So we're busy doing that. It's basically a hands-on trainer where you pull out avionics equipment, put other equipment in for heavy aircraft, the big wide body aircraft that the Air Force has. Bell Helicopter recently won the competition for the Black Hawk replacement. And they have a product called the V280 that kind of looks like a V-22, if you know those aircraft. And they have to figure out how is everyone who touches that helicopter going to be trained to do whatever it is that they need to do when they touch it. And so that's called a TISRA, Training System Requirements Analysis, and they've hired us to go build that TISRA for that new Black Hawk replacement helicopter. So we've been busy doing that for a couple of years now. So basically, in the past 7 years, we've gone from 16 to 19 million type of company to a 40 to 50 million type of company. And so there's a lot of growth that's involved in that. So we've done that. We've basically tripled in revenue, but increased staff about 20%. And so we're have a lot more subcontractors, a lot more other folks that are helping us get this stuff done. So that's kind of the thing. My head's down and trying to manage all the growth that we've got.
Absolutely. And kudos to you and having that first year down and 11 to go on this huge contract that you won. And the future is definitely bright for AVT Simulation. Soon from a small company to a medium company, it seems like another 7 years. So congrats on that. Let's
Thanks.
transition. Yeah, you're very welcome. Kyle, let's transition. Talk about leadership. What do you do other than read Good to Great and share that with your brutal facts with your employees? What do you do to sharpen your skill sets to aid you to thrive in your professional life?
Well, I'm not sure where it started, but somewhere along the way, I learned to be a researcher. And what I mean by that is, there's a decision to be made. And as long as you have some time, right, there's some decisions you got to make right away, or it doesn't matter what you decide. But as long as you got some time, to do that research. So basically, if I got a decision to make, first thing I'll do is I'll talk to the staff and say, okay, what do you guys think? Here's what's going on, get their opinion. I'll convey some of my experiences in there. And then I'll have sort of a gut reaction at that point. I'll probably think, okay, this is the way that I need to go on that decision based on that input that I got. And then, like I said, if there's still enough time, I don't just go with the gut. Then I go out and look at industry and try to figure out what does the industry data say. Now, lately, maybe the last year or so, I've been using a lot of AI tools and kind of seeing what AI spits out, whether it's Chat GPT or whatever. Now I have Chat GPT on my phone, and I actually pull up things, pretty much on a daily basis and ask it questions just to see what it said. And then go to outside experts, get their opinion on things, whether it's, the real experts, like you go to a lawyer or you go to somebody who has a doctorate in something and get their opinion, or just other CEOs, other people that I know in the industry, and see what they think about it. And I have run experiments as well. I can tell you during COVID, or right after COVID, there was a big push at AVT to work from home. And so I actually ran an experiment where I put one group in one room, another group in another room, and I took the leader of the one group and I left him in that room, and the leader of the other group, and I made him remote. I gave them both the instruction booklet for building a Spider-Man Lego set. Okay. And the group that had the leader via Microsoft Teams trying to direct them on how to build the Lego set, because he had the instructions, was in the one side, and the other side where the leader was in the room. He wasn't allowed to show the instructions to the rest, but he was just reading them and then directing them and seeing what they were doing. And it wasn't even close. I mean, the guy, when the leader was in the room versus the one that was on the Microsoft Teams, he was on like step 90 or something after the 2 hours that we did it, or hour and a half that we did it. Whereas the other person was on the Microsoft Teams one was on like step 10 or 12 or something like that. I mean, it was just a complete, it's like the Boston Celtics playing my high school basketball team, right? It just wasn't even close. So the good thing about the experiment and using that technique was then I came to a particular belief probably before the experiment, but when I did the experiment with my leadership team, they all saw it as well. And so all of the push to say, okay, we should all be working from home died down significantly after that experiment, because the entire leadership team was I don't know if they were on board with me, but they understood what my perspective was, that I didn't think it was the right thing for us to do. since we're such a hands-on, the simulator type of company. That's when I pull the trigger and make the final decision and move forward.
A great experiment to run, especially in a hands-on, and leadership calls for a multi-dimensional approach at different factors. And it seems like you key into a lot of different ways and tools in order to get you there. Now, your service time in the active reserve and in the civilian force undoubtedly got you some great experience and some great advice from leaders as you was growing up. So what advice did you receive that you would like to pass on to an emerging leader today?
Well, there's something that happened. Actually, it was on my commissioning day when I first got in the service. My dad came and commissioned me. He was a retired colonel from the Air Force, pilot, a couple of tours in Vietnam, that kind of thing. And so, I just get my commission. He's the guy that pinned me on. And then I had said to him afterwards, I kind of didn't really expect a real answer because he likes to joke around and whatnot. I didn't really expect a real answer. And I said, so Dad, you got any advice for me as I start my career? And he told me two things. The first was you should do a journal so that you know what you've done throughout your career and that kind of stuff. I didn't listen to that one, but so I probably should have, but I didn't. But his second thing that he told me was he goes, everywhere you go, find good people and take them with you to the next assignment. And so I've done that throughout my career, and especially getting into sort of the leadership positions here in the civilian side. So I actually have about 10% of my staff here at AVT are people that I know, have worked with in the past and that kind of stuff. And when I came here, I brought them here, or they were already here and they helped drag me here, right? So that's something that I've lived up, and it's always worked out very well for me. That when these guys, because you know what you're getting when you get them, you know what their personality is, you know whether or not they're going to fit into the culture that you're trying to build, you know what their work ethic is, those kind of things. And so I've always done that. But we have a large number of people at AVT that I've brought in because of that.
Great advice from a great leader, aka Pops, right? It's a
Yeah,
lot
that's
of
right.
them are jokesters, but they mean well. And too bad you didn't have that journal, because as a researcher, you could have went back on that today.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But great advice, research, having that journal, and also, take along the teams that individuals that will bring forward some great knowledge and some great revenue and projection to your team. So also love to hear a memorable leadership aha moment, Kyle, that you've had that you'd like to share with our audience as well.
Well, I guess there's another thing. So it was probably it was just before I got commissioned. Before I started, I was at Florida State, and I got a part-time job handing out basketballs at Tully Gym there in Tallahassee. And there was a gentleman who had been working there for a number of years. Very hard worker. I mean, he was always moving and grooving and doing something in there. He liked to play. He liked to play that game. I don't know if you know it, but there's a game where you put dots on a sheet of paper and you draw a line, and then they draw a line, and then you draw a line, and then somebody gets a box and they put their initials in it, and whoever has the most boxes wins. There's a game that used to be played or a long time ago, but anyway, he liked playing that game with people, and he'd fill out an entire sheet of paper with dots, and anybody he could, he'd get them to play that game with him. And pretty much every time he played, he'd only get one or two boxes, and whoever he played, filled up the entire paper, with their box. But this guy was a super hard worker, super nice guy, and he was great for that position and for that job that he was in. And what it made me think at that point in time, that anytime somebody kind of does something wrong, they make a mistake somewhere, don't assume that they're doing it for malice. Don't assume that they're doing it because they were lazy and they didn't try the best they could to do it. You should assume that they either didn't have enough information, didn't have the ability to complete the task, that you didn't give them good enough instruction. Start from that position. Start from the position that the situation around that person is what had them fail, and see if you can shore up that position, give them some more instruction, give them some more in training, help them out in some way. So I just, want to lead from a position where I don't assume the worst of people when they don't perform or have an issue.
That's a great approach from the leader standpoint, because you give grace, and you also are looking at a solution prior to laying blame, right? And so that is a great approach to leadership. And a lot of leaders are challenged with how to approach those certain situations. And so, as we're talking about challenges, what are certain strategies you use with your team or with the situation to deal with change and challenges?
I think we kind of covered it a little bit in that, I sort of gather the team, I ask them first, and I kind of walk through that process and do the research or whatever. Uh, but I think it's important to also understand that you don't try to make everyone happy with your decision, right? I mean, you can try to come to some consensus or whatever, but if you're trying to make everybody happy, you're going to be making bad choices along the way, and you might even be making the worst choice if you're trying to do that. Uh, there's always going to be some opinions out there that say you should go in that direction when maybe that direction isn't the right one. So don't do that. But at the same time, communicate why you're going in the way that you're going, right? Communicate to everybody. Okay, I've heard you. I've heard this. I've researched that. Or I ran this experiment. I did this, that, and the other thing. And here's why. Because of all that, I think that this is the right answer, and I think I'm going to go this way. Sorry, I didn't go your way, but here's why it is that I went in the direction that I did. And I think that if you do that, um, even though they may not agree with the decision, they'll respect the decision. They'll salute a little sharper than they would have. They'll go in the direction that you want them to go in because they understand why it is that you're going that way. They may give you a second attempt to try to convince you of their thoughts or of that, and that's okay. And you can just decide whether or not that changes your mind or not, and then move on. And then maybe the final thing is, I'm talking about doing all this research and discussion and all that is timely is important. You want to be fast, you want to be flexible, but you want to be fast and do all that research and all that, work through that process as fast as you can. Because if you take a long time to make a decision, you might be making a decision by indecision. It just it becomes too late to push it into the direction that you want to push it in. So you got to do all that, but you got to do it as fast as you can to get through it.
No, absolutely. Be part of that decision loop, empowering your team. I heard a lot about communication, research, and transparency. So love everything you shared, Kyle, and kudos to you and your company, AVT. So folks listening, how do they get a hold of you, Kyle, or AVT Simulation?
Yeah, so it's www.avtsim.com, AVT Simulation. avtsim.com is our website. All our contact information is on there. And also for our training courses, how to build simulators, business law, how to win proposals, all those courses are available on our AVT Sim website and through the UCF continuing education website, because we have a partnership with UCF for all the how to build simulator courses.
Well, folks, we will have all those information and links for you to get a hold of Kyle and AVT and all that they are doing. And if you want to get a hold of us at the Leadership Void Podcast, the Leadership Void at gmail.com is where you'll send that correspondence. If you like a leadership topic covered or a guest, you'll do it by those means.
Yeah, and thanks, Kyle, for being on our show. And we also like to thank our sponsors, Triple Nickel, A Hero for Kids, and FAVOB for being our sponsors for this wonderful show. Kyle, AVT Simulation, and you are doing some great things. Much success in your future, and have a great day.
Thank you, Vince. Thanks, Enrique.
Well, folks, we just heard from Cal and AVT and all the great things that they are doing. And we're so proud of the veteran community here in Orlando, Central Florida, and the corridor, right from Tampa to Melbourne. And a lot is happening out here with the veteran community. And today is a bittersweet day for both Vince and I, as we are just recorded our 222nd 222 episode, 5 seasons of recording and highlighting great veterans, military spouses, first responders throughout our time with the Leadership Void podcast. But unfortunately, we have to say that today is our final episode as a podcast. I'll let my partner here, Vince, kind of close us out. But it has been such a great pleasure to do this for the last five seasons and get so far in what we initially had a conversation about. Basically, we were at the news agency when we decided that we would do this. But thank you, everyone that has been with us all this time. Our sponsors that have brought us through. We've had a handful of sponsors throughout the time. Thank you all for being with us and allowing us to bring you all these great guests.
Yeah, absolutely, Enrique. You know, we started out 5 seasons ago here in Central Florida with Central Florida guests, and we closed it out with a Central Florida guest. So, full circle moment. It is bittersweet. As I mentioned early on, Christmas in July, this is the bow and closing out this present for you all. We hope you enjoyed every episode. It will still be on social media, so please go back to it. We had great guests all from all branches of the service, from first responders and also patriots. So please check us out. We're still here, but you know, our future is still bright. You never know what's going to happen. You definitely can follow Enrique and his podcast, you know, Developing the Leader Within. So that's still going on. Talk about leadership if you still have that craving to fill that void, as per se. But this has been a great journey for both of us, for me exclusively, for learning from this great man too, as well. Mentor, coach, and a great friend, as I call Enrique. So thank you, everyone, for being on our show. Thanks for all our sponsors, as Enrique mentioned, and our audience. Without you, this wouldn't be possible. So it's been a pleasure. We salute you and continue to address that void in leadership. Have a great one.